Have you noticed that word order in English language is different from the word order in Lithuanian language? This is why you must be careful not to fall into the translation trap, which is thinking in the structure of your native language and translating word for word into English. This can make it difficult for others to understand you. Word order in English language is very important. For the most part, English language uses order of words in a sentence to indicate the grammatical and logical relationships, whereas in Lithuanian is done by cases or word endings. The most common word order in English statements is subject, verb, object. Here I'm talking about statements, so not about questions or imperatives. So what is subject, verb, and object? Verb expresses the action or the state, and subject and object are closely related to the verb, because subject is the person or thing that performs the action of the verb, and object is the person or thing that is affected by the action of the verb. Or in other words, it's who does what or who did what. You can change the tense depending on what you want to say. We don't have a strict word order in Lithuanian language, so if we move words around in a sentence, that usually doesn't change the meaning of the whole sentence. But in English language, we have a very strict word order. So if we move words around in an English sentence, it usually changes the meaning of the whole sentence. Let's have a look at some examples. Jonas suvalgė mėsainį in Lithuanian is the same as mėsainį suvalgė Jonas. Here we have word endings, mėsainį, Jonas, which show us the relationships between the words. So we know who ate what, even when we change the words, when we move the words around. John ate a hamburger in English language is the same as Jonas suvalgė mėsainį, because here we have a subject, here a verb, and here an object. Let's have a look at this sentence. When we change the words, when we move the words around, a hamburger ate John, we have a completely different meaning. Mėsainis suvalgė Joną. Remember that in English language we do not have the word endings to indicate relationships. Instead of that, we have strict word order. So here we'll always have a subject, here a verb, and here an object. Let's have a look at another example. Tonis susikrovė lagaminą in Lithuanian is the same as lagaminą susikrovė Tonis. Again, we have the word endings, so when we move words around, the meaning won't change. However, here, Tony packed a suitcase, that's the same, Tonis susikrovė lagaminą, and here, a suitcase packed Tony is completely different. Lagaminą susikrovė Tony. Again, we have a strict word order to indicate the relationships between the words, and to indicate who packed what or what packed who, right? Lagaminas susikrovė Tony is probably not what we want to say here, and that's the reason why you should be careful and not translate word for word from Lithuanian to English, because if you translated these two sentences word for word, you would get a completely different meaning in English language. Of course, not every sentence in English is that short and consists of only a subject, a verb, and an object. You may expand on your English sentences by adding manner, that answers the question how, place, where, and time, when. For example, Peter plays football well in the park every weekend. So, of course, we start with subject, verb, object, and we have manner, place, and time. You can skip things here, but you cannot move things around. So you may only have manner, for example, Peter plays football well, or you may only have place and time. Peter plays football in the park every weekend, and nothing for manner. By this logic, you can skip things, but you cannot move things around, because remember, we have a strict word order in English language. Of course, there are some exceptions to this rule. However, today we're not going to talk about the exceptions, because today I want you to focus on the most common word order in English statements: subject, verb, objects. If you learn the structure, it will make your English sound much more fluent and your sentences will be much more logical. There are a couple of more things you should know, and first of them is we always have a subject and a verb in an English statement. Here I'm not talking about questions or the imperatives. Imperatives, as you may already know, are used to give instructions and commands. For example, run, listen, wait. So in this case, we don't have a subject, but any other English statement, even the shortest one, will always have a subject and a verb. Whereas in Lithuanian, you can form a short sentence with only a verb. For example, lyja. This is perfectly acceptable. However, in English, is raining would be a mistake, would be grammatically incorrect. In this case, we don't have a person or thing performing the action, so we will need to use a dummy subject. It is raining. There are two dummy subjects in English language, it and there. What are dummy subjects? So these are two words, it and there, which do not convey a meaning in a sentence, but only fill the space of a subject in a sentence. So when we do not have a person or a thing performing the action, we will use a dummy subject. For example, sninga. Is snowing? No. It is snowing? Yes, it's correct. And here's one more example. Yra daug idėjų. Again, we cannot translate word for word because we cannot start a sentence with a verb. We need to start a sentence with a subject. In this case, again, we do not have a person or a thing performing the action, so we will need to use the dummy subject there. There are lots of ideas. And one more thing you should know is that in Lithuanian, we can sometimes omit a verb. For example, ji graži. Instead of saying ji yra graži, we omit the verb yra and say ji graži. But in English language, she beautiful would be incorrect. We need to have a subject and a verb in each statement. So, she is beautiful is the correct way to say the sentence. So remember, even the shortest statement in the English language will always have a subject and a verb. Now, how do we form questions in English language? Let's quickly have a look at how we form direct questions. Usually direct questions follow this structure. Question word, for example, when, where, why, etc. Auxiliary verb or helping verb. These are the verbs that help us form tenses. For example, do, does, did, have, has, am, is, are, etc. Subject, you already know what the subject is, and main verb. This is the important verb in a sentence, so the verb that performs the action of a subject, right? The verb that expresses the action of a subject. For example, where do you live? And sometimes some direct questions may not have a main verb in this position. For example, where are you? This rule will apply to questions when we make questions with the verbs am, is, are, was, where. And sometimes you may also omit the question word. This happens when the answer to a question is yes or no. For example, do you live in a flat? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Are you happy? Yes, I am. No, I'm not. You may have noticed that learning the correct way to structure your sentences in English is a major step towards thinking in English and therefore speaking more naturally and fluently. If you liked this lesson, share it with your friends. And if you would like more help studying English, contact me.